Here we are, you guys. We have Dr. Katie Hirsch with us here. We're going to dive into all things HIIT training, essential amino acids or EAAs today. And we also, of course, want to learn all about Katie's background, what got her excited about this field. But as our listeners know, we don't want to reveal our truths or lies first. So, Katie, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to talk to you today and hear some two truths and a lie first before we get the whole background on you.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here and see if I can give you some tricky truths and a lie. We'll see.
Okay. Fire away and we will take a guess.
All right. So since I'm entering now my fall semester, saying goodbye to summer a little bit, but I had a really super fun summer. So I've got 3 summer related activities for you to guess which ones I actually did and which ones I did not do. So the first one, number 1, I hiked and camped at the bottom, hiked to and camped at the bottom of the Grand Canyon.
Ooh, okay.
Number 1. Number 2, I went rappelling down a waterfall. Number 3, I rode camels in the desert.
Oh, I mean, all those sounds really fun to do. Take me camping.
I said I had a super fun summer. So.
Yeah, it sounds super fun. Okay, so camping in the Grand Canyon, camels, and rappelling down a waterfall.
Yeah.
I feel like you could rappel down a waterfall near the Grand Canyon. Maybe you did those together.
Maybe did.
Camels is a stretch. I feel like you have to go far to ride camels. I'm going to say maybe you did not ride camels, but what do you think, Amanda?
But then camels is so out there. So I'm wondering if it's true.
Could be.
I had a Grand Canyon adventure myself this summer. So I'm going to say rappelling down a waterfall.
Okay. Don't tell us the lie yet. Yeah. We'll let our listeners know about your fun summer adventures at the end. But let's take a little bit of a dive into your background. We have our intro, the listeners heard about kind of career and stuff like that, but what got you excited about science, research, this specific field?
Yeah, I think my love for research and specifically what I research started originally back as an undergrad. So I went to Truman State University, really small Division II size school in middle of nowhere, Kirksville, Missouri. And it was there I was a track and field and cross country athlete, really interested in how do I maximize my own performance and be the best athlete I could be. And in that process, I just really fell in love with, I just wanted to know everything. I wanted to know why, I wanted to know how. I had some really cool opportunities to get involved with research as an undergrad.
Nice.
And I think going through the hard part about exercise science, the most visible career is physical therapy, but I just always knew that wasn't the right fit for me. And I was never really sure how I could merge all these worlds together. And I loved nutrition. I loved exercise. I wanted a career I could put all those together. And then I got, I realized whatever career it was going to require a master's of some sort, just the things I was interested in. And I got lucky enough to go to UNC Chapel Hill, where I ended up doing my master's and PhD with Dr. Abby Smith Ryan there. She's fantastic. But it wasn't until I got there at UNC, that was when everything really clicked. And I realized how much I loved research, and I specifically loved the type of research we were doing. It was very applied. I could talk to you or anybody about what we were doing, and it was all things that applied to people where they're at in their lives. And it didn't matter if I was talking to my parents, to athletes, to my grandparents, to friends. So I really loved that. It allowed me to merge the nutrition and exercise. And then I think I just loved that it was always changing. I could always dive into new questions, work with lots of different people. It was never the same thing day after day. So yeah, I ended up doing master's, PhD, had just an absolute blast working in Abby's lab. And then after I finished my PhD, I had the opportunity to go do a postdoc at the University of Arkansas for medical sciences. So that's in Little Rock. I worked there with Dr. Arnie Ferrando and Bob Wolf, diving heavy into muscles and muscle metabolism and protein and amino acids. So I did 2 years there, looking at heavy clinical populations. And that's where my work really took a hard path down women's health and female physiology. That was always an interest and desire, but that's where I really focused in. And then, yeah, just a year ago, started now at South Carolina, and now I'm forging my own research path. So we're starting year 2 and really trying to hit hard this women's health thing across the lifespan and female athletes and all things down that path. So kind of fun.
Awesome. Yeah. When you were at Chapel Hill with Abby Smith Ryan, were you doing any sex specific stuff there as well?
Yeah. So it was there. I remember we were doing a study at the time on actually a carbohydrate supplement in female cyclists. We were basically reproducing a study that had been done in a male only cohort, and we were replicating it in a female cohort. And based on the results of that study, that sent me on a deep dive, huge rabbit hole of trying to understand why we were seeing the results that we were seeing, why they looked different. And I think it was a result of that study that my eyes were really open to the lack of female athlete and female specific research. I think as a former distance runner, especially, I had just been, carb loading, carbs this, carb that. And there was actually very little research in females specifically. And that just really blew my mind. I was like, how can that be the core of our nutrition? We know females have some differences in carb metabolism, but we just have barely actually studied it. So after that, I really made it a point in my work to do sex comparisons and at least include an equal number of males and females. Sometimes with research, like for recruitment purposes, you want to include both just to, maximize the maybe short time frame that you have to get a study done or something. But I always made a point with my stuff that I was doing to try to make sure we had equal representation. So we would look at the group together, but then I could at least explore if there were some differences or trends that we were starting to see, which could then inform future work of like, okay, now when I move to a sex specific population, let's really dig into why we were maybe seeing that mechanism. Or inform some of those future questions. So yeah, did a lot of sex differences while I was there.
And can we circle back just to the study that like opened your eyes and like blew your mind? Like, was it was carb loading specifically that you were seeing, or was it?
We were looking specifically. It was a modified starch beverage. So we were looking at if we did like a glycogen depleting protocol in these female cyclists, and then it was a crossover design. One time they drank the modified starch drink, one time they drank like your traditional sports beverage that has carbohydrates in it, like a Gatorade. I don't remember if it was specifically Gatorade, but and then compared to like a placebo, just a non-caloric. And so they did this glycogen depleting protocol. They drank the beverage. They had, 3 hours or something. I forget the exact number to recover and let it digest and absorb. And then we basically did like a time trial type outcome. And so we measured things like their wattage output, their time to completion, their all these, performance type outcomes. And ultimately, we saw no effect of any beverage. Which there's a lot of reasons like why that happened and not to dig into those way too much, but that sent me down a spiral of really thinking about and learning about women glycogen load a little bit differently. Women utilize carbohydrates a little bit differently. Impacts maybe of hormone fluctuations on our use of glucose. How does that impact glycogen resynthesis? All those types of things. So it really sent me down that rabbit hole for a little while.
Yeah, fascinating. So glycogen depleted, drank this, one of the three options, placebo, sports drink, or starch after the glycogen depletion, waited, and then did a time trial. And there was no difference between the three different trial options, I guess, or experimental.
Yeah. Basically,
interesting.
Did nothing. None of them did anything.
Huh. Wow. And was hormone phase accounted for, or?
So those were some of the limitations. That study, we didn't necessarily account for hormone phase. So that could be contributing to why we didn't see those effects. Yeah. So I don't want the message to be like carbohydrates don't work. That's not the message. It was just really shocking to me. I would have assumed we would have at least saw some benefit.
Right.
So was it a timing issue? Did they just need a little more time? Was it a phase of the cycle thing? Different things like that. So, but I use that study a lot just as an example of it's not always exactly the same. And there are a lot of factors when we study females. We just need to take into extra consideration and really to make sure we're getting the right recommendations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is really interesting. And you said that study was a replication of a study done on males only as well?
Yeah, so when they did it in the males, it was a pretty linear improvement. So the placebo didn't really do much benefit. The sports drink did better. And then the starch did even better. So interesting. So that's what we were comparing.
Yeah, very neat. I mean, studies like that, make your brain start spinning. Like what questions
really threw me for a spiral for a
what studies do you have to follow up now and do to kind of figure out what's going on there?
Right.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, as we all know now, like you definitely are an expert in the sex differences area, but you also have quite a bit of published research in the HIIT training and essential amino acid supplementation area. So we definitely want to dive into that conversation with you today. And before we kind of break down those studies, can you just tell us what EAAs are, or essential amino acids are, and then and where people can get them, things like that?
So EAAs, essential amino acids, those are basically the primary components of protein. So proteins are made up of strings of amino acids. The EAAs are the ones that we essentially, not a pun there intended, have to consume. We can't produce them in our body. So there's non-essentials that we can produce within our body, but these essentials we have to get from outside food sources. And those essential amino acids are really important because those are really the driving force behind muscle building, muscle repair, muscle protein turnover. Without those components, we don't get good muscle effects. And so you get essential amino acids from consuming different protein sources. So our best sources are going to be animal products. Those tend to have a higher concentration of the EAAs. They're also in a more appropriate ratio that matches our human muscle composition. So that's really helpful. Whey proteins, one of our best and most easily absorbed sources. EAAs are also in plant sources. Plants just tend to have a lower percentage of EAAs, and they're often lacking one or more of those essential amino acids. At least they're lacking in an amount that's appropriate to really stimulate and support muscle protein synthesis in humans. So we could dive into those weeds. I could talk about that for quite a while, but
Yeah.
you can get them from all your food sources. Animal products a little bit better than plants. And then essentially the supplement, what I like to point out to people, an EAA supplement then is we took the protein, we broke it down into the amino acids, we just included those 9 essential amino acids. And that is different than a branch chain amino acid supplement, which is what most people think of. Those are really common. We see them on the shelves all the time. The difference, though, a branch chain amino acid supplement only contains 3 essential amino acids. So leucine, isoleucine, valine. Those are really important essential amino acids, but we really need all 9 to get muscle-specific benefits. So that's kind of the differentiation there. So if our goal is to support and benefit muscle building, we want to make sure we get all 9.
I think that's a good question, or a good thing you just pointed out, because we do get that a lot. I think the BCAAs blew up for, I think some people still think they're blowing up right now. They
have a different time and a place.
Yes.
I could go on that tangent, but
Yeah.
for muscle building, maybe not your best option.
Yeah, well, definitely, tidbits on the VCAs and time and place would be, maybe we can save that for the end. So of the studies, you had 3 studies, HIIT training, and essential amino acids effects on muscle, HIIT training, essential amino acids effect on metabolism, and then HIIT and EAAs effects on training. And then let's see, there was some fed and fasted stuff, some other things if we want to have time to get into it, but, where do you want to start with those? I'd love for you to
Let me give you the background on this study. So there's these 3 published papers. They all are different components of one really big study. So this was my dissertation. This is what earned me my PhD, essentially. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
So big shout out. I did this study while I was at UNC Chapel Hill working in Abby Smith Ryan's lab. Took a huge team of people to do all of this.
Wow.
It was a really big training study. And essentially what we were trying to do, we had done a lot of work with high intensity interval training. We love HIIT training. It's a really efficient and effective way to do exercise. So we know just in a couple weeks, doing this 2-3 days a week, we see these really awesome cardiometabolic benefits. But something we showed, we were one of the first labs to show this, is by doing HIIT, especially on a bike, we were seeing increases in muscle, which was a little bit unique from a more aerobic, anaerobic style of exercise to see these muscle gains. It's not what we would normally think of for trying to maximize muscle. And so we showed definitely some increases in muscle size within the legs. So we kind of wanted to do a follow-up and dig a little bit deeper on, okay, is this really happening? And if we support it and provide the appropriate nutrition, can we drive that even more? If so, now we're getting a really cool bang for our buck here. So thinking about people that don't have a lot of time to exercise, if we can get them to do something high intensity a couple of days a week, can we benefit both your cardiometabolic and cardiovascular health? With HIIT, we know that's very true. But can I also get a little bit of muscle specific benefit? And so that's what the study was really targeting. So the first paper, we really focused on those metabolic benefits, what's happening metabolically, how might protein drive some of that. And so kind of the findings of that one, HIIT does its job. HIIT's really effective. We did 2 days a week in this overweight, obese population, 50-50 male, female, average age, I think was 37-ish. And that was really important. These are our people that are heavy into their careers at this point. A lot of them had families, a lot of them had kids. They're wanting to be healthier, but there's a lot of life barriers that just make it a little bit difficult. So they just came in 2 days a week for 8 weeks. We definitely saw improvements in their VO2, just like we would expect. We did measure resting metabolic rate. We looked at like fat oxidation, all at rest. We saw maybe some trends towards HIIT increasing some of that. There wasn't a clear benefit of amino acids in this part of the study, but something that was kind of interesting, we didn't see, when we looked across the whole body, like big body comp changes. So no real noticeable changes in body fat, total body muscle, percent fat, things like that. But in comes study number 2. So the second piece of the study, we really did a whole bunch of muscle specific measures. So that's the second paper, was really focusing on various things related to muscle. As we started to zoom in, so we went whole body, didn't really notice much change. What if we just look at your thigh muscle mass? That was the biggest target with that cycling protocol. We started to see some trends towards increases from our groups that did HIIT and had amino acids. As we zoomed in even more and we looked at muscle cross-sectional area, so we can do that with some ultrasound scans. And that's probably our most sensitive measure of muscle change. We're getting directly at that vastus lateralis muscle within your thigh. We definitely saw clear increases in that vastus lateralis muscle. So that was occurring at both 4 weeks and 8 weeks, which is a pretty great trend. And it was fairly linear, which was cool to see. And so the take home from that part was HIIT with maybe a little bit of benefit of amino acids, was basically stimulating enough increase in muscle to kind of offset what we would expect with age-related loss of muscle, just like annually. So the cool thing, and maybe the big take home from all of this, is doing HIIT, adding some protein in there. You're definitely going to get some benefits to your metabolic health. We can definitely at least help maintain good, healthy musculature through that time period. But then kind of the extra unique step we took, we incorporated a measure of whole body protein turnover. And so that was then what I went on to do for my postdoc and dug into a whole lot more. But this was my first exposure to it. And basically we saw across your whole body, you have proteins. So muscles, organs, tissues, everything has proteins in it. Just kind of at rest across the day, we did see an EAA stimulated increase in protein turnover. And so while we didn't see that totally translate to some of our metabolic measures, there looked like there were maybe some trends. So the thoughts, maybe we didn't have like a large enough dose of amino acids to really elicit bigger metabolic changes. But those are some things we're starting to dig into more now. We can stimulate greater turnover. Does that lead to even better metabolic benefits? Can we enhance maybe some of that fat oxidation, more energy expenditure? Protein turnover is a energy costly process. What does that mean then for muscle gain? So that was kind of like the crux of the project. I could keep going, but I'll pause.
That's really great. I mean, I think a couple questions I have was regarding kind of maybe the methods, or kind of like what was the HIIT? What did that look like? Like, was it 20 minutes of something like?
So it's a really simple protocol. We like to do it on a bike just because we can do a little bit more stationary. And they can, sorry, my light's
all good. I remember that from the college campus days.
So on a bike, but we did basically 10 sets of 1 minute at 90% of their maximal intensity, interspersed with 1 minute of complete rest. So we use this protocol a lot in our studies. It's really effective. Most people can do anything for a minute.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, works really well for a lot of different populations. We see really good benefits. So that was the protocol we used. We did implement kind of a unique progression through it. Something that happens with HIIT, people adapt to it really fast. So we incorporated kind of a system to when should we increase their resistance so that it's always hard and high intensity. And so once you got to your 10th set, we basically said, okay, on this last one, I want you to pedal for as long as you can. If you can pedal for longer than about a minute, 15 seconds, then it's probably time to up it a little bit. So that's kind of our recommendation for HIIT in general. By that last one, if you're truly doing it hard, that last one, you should barely be able to get through that last minute. If you can keep going for more than 15 seconds after that, it's probably time to bump your intensity. Nice. So that worked really, really well and kept challenging them. By the end, they were working pretty darn hard. So.
Yeah, that's great. And so say 90% of their max, we're talking VO2 max or heart rate max, or?
We did a VO2 max test. So took them to max, and then we took a percentage of the max wattage that they achieved during that test. And then that was what we set the bike at, and then built them up from there.
Awesome. And then with regards to and that was 2 times a week, you were saying, I imagine on non-consecutive days.
Yep.
Awesome.
We made them take at least 24 hours in between.
Perfect.
But and that was some of it too, was to show feasibility of, these people's schedules were always changing, and kids got a ball game, or I had a late day at work, or so. But yeah, they at least had 24 hours in between.
Did you have them, out of curiosity, do any sort of like warm up before starting the 1 minute on, 1 minute off?
I think they were allowed like a 5-minute warm up. So pedal on the bike at whatever resistance they wanted till they felt good. That's generally, what I do with it.
Yeah, that is, definitely feasible. 20-25 minute workout to that's great. And so with regards to the essential amino acids, what was the total gram dose there, and then when were they dosing with it in relation to the exercise?
So we had essentially 4 groups of people in this study. One group just did the HIIT, so they just came in 2 days a week, did their exercise, went on their way. A second group only took the amino acids. They didn't do any exercise. So they took a 3.6 gram dose of EAAs twice every day. So we encourage them to take 1 dose sometime mid-morning, and then 1 dose sometime in the middle of the afternoon. So we didn't want them to take it specifically with a meal, but try to hit maybe sometimes in the middle of the day, when they're kind of maybe more in that between fasted type stage. So they took it twice a day for 8 weeks. And then we had a third group that did both the HIIT and the amino acid supplementation. So on the days they were not exercising, we had them take that supplement once in the morning, once in the evening, just like the EAA group. And then the days they exercised with us, we had them come in, they took the supplement, same dose, about 30 minutes before their workout. They exercised, and then we had them take it again 30 minutes after. And so tried to time it a little bit around that workout to really try to maximize stimulation, both going into it and then after. And then we had one group that was a control, that they didn't do anything. They just continued with their normal life.
Nice. And with that, the result of that, you said it was obese men and women 50-50. Out of curiosity, did you pull any of the, like, differentiate the men versus the women data?
We did. So that was an important part that I really wanted to make sure we did. So we had balanced groups all the way across. So we were able to explore some of that. And I think the cool thing that we saw is there were maybe some suggestions of just some different trends as far as the rate at which men and women adapted. But the big take home that I really like to point out is we saw especially with changes in muscle, which is really what we were trying to look at. That was a big piece. It really reduced the amount of variability that we saw. So with just HIIT, we saw most people improved and saw increases in muscle, especially the men. With the women, a little bit, it was lower. And then we had a few more that didn't see as much of an increase. But when we added the amino acids, especially in the female group, we saw everybody at least maintain or increase. We didn't really see as many people that lost a little bit of muscle, which sometimes happens. And so to me, that was a really cool piece, and kind of the importance of sometimes looking at individual responses in your data is, even though the averages didn't show crazy changes, we could see just a more consistent response, especially in that female group, as far as promoting those adaptations. So that was really exciting, and stuff we're trying to build off of now.
That's awesome. 2 times a week for 8 weeks, right? Is what you're Yeah, that's pretty neat. And let's see, oh goodness, I had another question I wanted to ask you, and now I'm like brain blanking. Oh no, I'm gonna have to just pull from one of my bullets here. I have fatigue brain right now. I was telling Amanda I'm fostering I signed up to foster a dog, and then I got matched with a mom and 7 puppies, and they're not sleeping at night. They're still adjusting. So I'm not sleeping at night. So my brain is like,
oh my goodness,
they're adorable.
Exciting, but that's a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot. So everybody's snoozing right now because we're up all night, staying nice and quiet. But so with that study, okay, so we have the metabolic benefits you mentioned just from HIIT in and of itself, improvements in the muscle with the EAAs. And then the other thing I wanted, I think, to chime in on too with the essential aminos. Oh, that's what it was protein in their day-to-day diet. Did you get a kind of baseline of what the kind of average intake was prior to the study, out of curiosity?
And I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but we did account for their normal diet intake. So we did that with 3-day diet logs. That could be a whole debate. But I like that method. And so it does give us at least a snapshot of what they're consuming. So we accounted for that. They, in general, were consuming like meeting recommendations, and we're over at least the 1.8. I think average was probably tended to be around 1, which is what we see in normal population. Something we did do in recruiting, we made sure we didn't include anybody that was already consuming an extra high protein diet, so maybe above like 1.6. So we wanted to keep people that were pretty average, normal protein consumers. And so that was kind of maybe one of the things is, were we adding enough of a stimulus beyond what they were already consuming? It probably did a little bit. Could we have stimulated it more? Maybe.
Okay. And when you say 1.6 for our listeners, we're talking about 1.6 grams per kilo per day, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Awesome. And so with your kind of information you've gained from that study and breaking that study down into those kind of 3 categories, do you suggest essential amino acids and at that dose for some of your, or for, I mean, maybe friends, clients, athletes? Like, what's your kind of takeaway for maybe, well, our population is definitely endurance athletes. Is that something you would suggest for them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think endurance athletes especially can get some good benefit from that. So one of the reasons we went with the essential amino acid supplement is especially around higher intensity exercise. A whey protein shake before may not sit very well with your stomach. After, sometimes it's just a little too heavy and doesn't sound great at that moment. And so the perk of an EAA supplement is it drinks more like a sports beverage. They're a fruity flavor, they're lighter, they don't have that heavier, milky type of a taste. So as far as like nutrient timing, it's a lot easier to do around high intensity workout. It's easier to get down. Tastes really great after. So from that aspect, we've done some previous work on, we've seen in women, especially getting a little bit of protein before your workout promotes good energy expenditure and promotes fat oxidation after. So when we're trying to like promote that, it's a really great way to do that. Outside of that, I think it's a super great option for people maybe following more of a plant-based diet, just because the overall percentage of EAA intake tends to be a little bit lower. So it can be an easy way to kind of supplement that and bolster what you're consuming. The perk of an EAA supplement with that is it doesn't impact your appetite quite as much. And so when a high fiber diet's already maybe making it a little difficult, especially for an athlete, to get enough calories, really simple thing to add, and it's just going to help bolster what you're doing. So that's great. I think where a lot of the research and what I was doing in Arkansas is in aging populations. So we know we develop a lot of anabolic resistance. Probably a lot of that's happening in the menopause transition. Some of our data is showing some of that. And so in those situations, we need an extra boost, something that's a little more stimulating. Those EAAs go straight into your bloodstream, cause a really strong stimulus, help overcome that. So it can be a great use and benefit there.
Yeah.
Then kind of the last spot I really like to promote it is in injury and around surgery. So the same thing happens when you get a major injury or go through a surgery. You get this huge stress and healing response that can prevent some of that anabolic response. We can be at risk for muscle breakdown depending on the severity, how long we're not using those muscles. And so the EAs, again, are a good way to help overcome that and promote more of a response. So the group I worked with in Arkansas, Dr. Ferrando and Dr. Wolf, their original studies with EAAs was to help like whole body burn patients.
Oh, wow.
And they have some serious anabolic resistance. And so the whole idea was, how do we help them from losing all this muscle while they're just trying to heal and repair. So that was a lot of the research specifically on EAs is actually in more clinical populations.
Wow.
Easy to intake there, but I think there's a lot of great benefits.
Wow. Yeah. That's really interesting. And then, so with the dosing with the EAAs, like, do you think 3.6 grams twice a day is the like dose, or do you think it potentially in some of those situations or populations needs to be a bit higher? I mean, I imagine for sure the burn.
Yeah, I think if it were me, I would maybe up it a little bit closer to like a 7 gram type of range. Potentially closer to maybe 10 as we get into like an aging or injury, surgery, maybe we're trying to overcome anabolic resistance a little bit. So that's maybe what I would recommend for dosing.
Interesting. That's really cool. And so with that too, kind of mentioning in the initial of the episode, kind of the food sources of it, is there potential for someone to get that additional amount of protein? Like, would that be equivalent of, so if they're consuming 7 grams of EAAs, is that equivalent to getting 7 more grams of protein from a chicken breast, for example? Or how is that? Like, how does that translate?
An easy way to kind of think about it is these EAAs would make up about 40 to 50% of like an animal-based protein.
Okay.
So if you wanted to, like, for really easy math, you could double it, and that's probably in the ballpark.
Gotcha.
And would get you close to like what you were consuming protein wise.
Okay.
But it's maybe not a direct translation because we're not getting the non-essentials is kind of the piece that we're missing, which may have some metabolic benefits. We know
Mhm.
muscularly, it's mostly the EAAs that are doing
Mhm.
the stimulating and the building. If we look at just like muscle protein synthesis and turnover.
Mhm.
But that could be kind of how you think about it.
Interesting. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
really interesting. And so let's see. I want to see here my questions from the listeners because some of them are essential amino acids specific. See if we kind of already covered all of those. So we had, I think you kind of covered this one, but should menstruating women take essential amino acids specifically in their luteal phase versus their follicular?
Yeah. I all throughout the cycle is really important.
Yeah.
So always emphasizing protein. We do maybe have a little bit higher protein breakdown potential during that luteal phase.
Mhm.
So definitely doesn't hurt. If you're someone who maybe struggles to consume enough protein from food, that is where supplements become super helpful. So whether you're getting it from a whey protein supplement, that's great. If you want to do an EAA supplement, that's great. If you want to do a plant-based supplement, that's great. Just maybe do an extra scoop to overcome some of the deficits in a plant protein. But yeah, all great options.
Okay, perfect. And then let's see, can essential amino acids minimize muscle soreness or help with muscle recovery?
Muscle soreness is a tricky one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that can contribute to that. I don't know the direct answer on if it does. I haven't done a lot of like delayed onset muscle, if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it definitely helps with muscle repair. It can speed up that recovery. We know the more we promote protein turnover in the muscle, so muscle's always building up, breaking down. That process is turnover. If we can facilitate that and promote the replacing of old damaged proteins with new proteins, that helps with maintaining good quality. That can help with better functionality and obviously good for muscle repair. So from that standpoint, going to be really good. Kind of, I'm going to deviate here for a second, but with the like muscle soreness, it made me think of this. One of the third pieces we studied with our HIIT and amino acid study was effects on training. And so we mostly think the protein's impacting your metabolism, your body composition, those types of things. But we wanted to see if it was impacting training itself in any way. So we looked at the people that consumed the EAAs right before and right after, and what impact did that have maybe on their progression, like their workload progression? Did it impact like their heart rate, which might indicate like how hard they're working? What about their RPE, so their perceived exertion? Those types of things. So across the board, most of our outcomes, we didn't see much of a clear benefit. Maybe not totally a surprise, but always worth looking at.
Yeah.
But where we did see kind of a unique finding was with the perceived exertion. And this was a very specific finding we found in the women specifically. And so if we looked at those who consumed some amino acids right before versus those who just did the HIIT, no nutrition, they pretty consistently reported 1.5 to 2 points lower on RPE. Wow. So we used a 6 to 20 RPE scale. And so basically just after each rep, we asked them like, how did that feel? And the difference of 1.5, 2 points is really the difference between saying that felt very hard and that just felt hard. And so it was all hard. That pattern though was consistent. The very first time they exercised, we saw it very clearly at 4 weeks. And then it kind of disappeared at 8 weeks. And so the reason the muscle soreness made me think of all of this is they consistently, if it felt a little bit easier, what are the implications then of coming back and doing that exercise again? They're a little more likely, like it didn't feel awful. It just was difficult. And then So at least in those early stages when you're just starting, we saw some really interesting, at least it was perceived as a little bit easier. My guess is by 8 weeks, everyone was working hard enough that RPE wasn't really sensitive enough. It just all felt really hard.
Yes, kept turning up the watts.
Interesting there in the beginning. And so the question, is there a unique mechanism in women potentially? And do we just need to dose it higher to get a similar effect in men? Just because they're bigger on average. So, but it was interesting. We really saw that specifically in the female group.
And so did you say that when they came in to do the bike test, they had to come in fasted? Is that what I understand?
We tried to encourage them not to eat directly before. We didn't tightly control for all of that. There's just so many things you can control for. But they at least had 30 minutes with the beverage. At least they had to wait that long. So
gotcha. Okay. And so the ones that were doing the essential amino acids, that was a drink or a capsule form?
These were all a beverage, a drink.
Okay. And if they were in the group that was not doing the essential aminos, they didn't get any liquid, or did they get plain water?
They just, they could have water if they wanted it, but we didn't necessarily give them anything.
Gotcha. Wow. Yeah. Interesting. So interesting. Okay. So that, I want to be mindful of your time, but if we have a second, that makes, of course, the fed versus fasted HIIT study. Can we dive into that kind of like quickly? Give our listeners a breakdown of that. And that was specifically on women only, correct? So give us the lowdown on that, the synopsis.
So this is, you're talking about the one that has HIIT, resistance training, and aerobic, that study?
Effects of nutrient timing on training adaptations in resistance trained females.
Oh, that one. Okay. We've done a few nutrient timing studies, so I wanted to make sure I talked about the right one. So that one, we were doing a high intensity resistance training protocol. So very similar, the HIIT protocol on the bike, maybe a little more aerobic type style. This was applying kind of a similar idea, but to resistance training. I think we did like 6 different exercises. The idea was we had them doing a weight that they could do. I think it was like 6 to 8 reps. And then you just got really short rest. And then you did it again, really short rest. So you did 3 reps on each exercise. And then you had maybe a minute break, enough time to like switch to the next exercise and do it again. So the idea was we did like a full body workout, tried to hit all the major muscle groups, but you just kept it moving to help keep heart rate high. And so that was where the higher intensity part came into play. So a little more like, I don't want to say it was like totally CrossFit style, but it would be a similar idea. You're breathing heavy, you're not taking very long breaks in between, so keeping that heart rate high. That was the important piece. And so we took that model of exercise, and really the question then was, for women, is there a difference in if I take my nutrition before I do the workout versus after, if I do the nutrition after the workout, versus if I don't do anything. And so we looked at a lot of the same outcomes as the other studies. So body composition, energy expenditure, substrate metabolism, strength, because that would be more of our outcome there. Basically what we found, doing something is better than nothing. So getting some nutrition before or after was definitely better than not getting any nutrition. There did tend to be maybe a slight benefit to getting some of that nutrition in before. And this is something we've seen across kind of all of our training studies, especially in women, is getting some form of nutrition, especially some protein before, definitely has some metabolic benefits that happen after. So we saw significant increase in that RER measure, which is an indication of fat utilization. And so that definitely increased with it was a mixed protein carb supplement we used in this study. So it wasn't just protein, but we see protein definitely promotes this a lot. And so that increased after. There was maybe a little bit of an increase in benefit for strength, especially in the upper body. I think we saw a little better increase with that nutrition before. So the idea with the nutrition before is you're getting some nutrition in before. That's going to help support the workout. Can you get a little bit extra out of it? It's also going to help circulate those amino acids, promote that protein turnover, and prevent a lot of breakdown during. And then that just carries over into the after. Now all those amino acids are circulating, going directly to the working muscles, where they can help repair. And so ultimately, I would say get something. That's step one. Getting something in before, especially with a little bit of protein in it, seems to be extra good for women. There's actually studies out there that show doing exercise completely fasted in women really isn't very effective metabolically. And so it happens sometimes. It's going to be okay. But if we can get some before, in women especially, that seems to be the way to go.
That's really interesting. So with the RER that you're talking about, that was measuring after the fact, like not during the exercise. So they had a higher kind of, for our listeners, like breakdown of fats for fuel after the exercise if they went into it fed with protein and carbohydrates.
Correct.
That's so interesting. And so do you think, I'm just brainstorming here, but do you think by giving some proteins, as you're saying, and some carbohydrates, they had these fuel sources circulating and then they're able to pull from those, but there's not a fat source in there. So the body, depending on what's going on, they pull that from the body sources, do you think?
Yeah. So the idea within higher intensity exercise, especially, that's going to be a more almost exclusively carbohydrate dependent mechanism, right? And so getting some carbohydrate circulating before, that's going to be directly used to support more of those anaerobic type pathways. We need that quick, faster energy. And so the idea, though, is during a high intensity workout, you get this huge stimulation in metabolism. You should see a big rise in carbohydrate use. That's all expected, all normal. What happens after is because we elevated energy expenditure, your metabolism, substrate use, fuel use during so much, it takes a while for that to come down. And you want it to take a while to come down. That's what's helping to continue to repair, refill energy stores. That's your like recovery period. But the harder we work, that process lasts a little bit longer. But what we see when we get some nutrition before, that's not only providing the like fuel source during the workout, but especially getting that protein after, it's really causing a muscle stimulation. And so during that recovery process, we see just a huge flux, an increase in that turnover. And that process of turnover relies on a fat source, mostly to fuel that part. We don't want to use our carbs in recovery. We're trying to replenish the carbs. So that protein tends to drive all of that increase, which then the idea would be long term, if I do that consistently, does that help promote that maybe shift in body comp where I'm promoting my muscle recovery, maintenance, increase, utilizing a little bit more of those circulating fats that are getting released to support the recovery part. So
amazing. Very neat. Well, thank you. Thank you for breaking that study down for us too. I'm glad we got to cover that. And for our listeners too, Dr. Hirsch has done a bunch of research as well on body comp testing methods, the validity. Maybe we can have you back for a second episode in the future. We can dive into all that, talking about body composition and muscle, all that stuff. because I know a lot of those devices are available to the public now to go in and test. And so I'm sure our listeners would love to know about the validity and things that maybe could skew those results, all that fun stuff. But I think we got all our listener questions answered, but I want to do your two truths and a lie. So we had camped down in the Grand Canyon. I think you said rappelled down a waterfall and rode camels. I'm thinking the camels was a lie. Amanda said the rappelling was a lie. Which one was the lie?
Camping was the lie.
Really? Oh my goodness. I think this is the first Amanda and I have like both been wrong.
I almost said that because it was summer, but
So full disclaimer, I have actually camped at the bottom of the Grand Canyon,
just not
but
this
it
summer.
Was a couple years ago, and we did it we actually did it on Halloween.
Oh, fun.
Which was really fun. So, but this summer I got to rappel down a waterfall right along the North Carolina, South Carolina border. There's a place you can go do that. And that was wild and a really cool experience. And then had the cool opportunity to take a trip to Israel. And part of that trip was we went to the desert and rode camels. So
my goodness. I thought that was for sure the lie. That's so cool. Good for you. That's amazing. Wow. That does sound like an epic summer. Waterfalls and camels. Cool. Yeah. Good for you.
Lots of good things.
So what's coming up on kind of the agenda for you? I know when we first logged on, you said school semester is starting, so you got your hands full with that, but any exciting research stuff coming down the pipeline that you're allowed to talk about?
I'm excited. Got some female athlete specific studies. So TBD on those, kind of some menstrual cycle effects.
Great.
And then trying to work out some neat methodology, maybe for some tracking across the cycle. So getting heavy into some menstrual cycle related questions that hopefully down the road, I have a lot of interest in kind of more of the aging questions. So that will hopefully then help facilitate and answer some of that. So we'll see. We're a young lab. We're just getting things off the ground. So excited to see where it all builds to.
Yeah, super, super exciting. Well, where can people find you, follow you, all that stuff?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Twitter's a lot of heavy science retweet type things. So if you like that, that's the place to go. Instagram, maybe not the most active, but I'm there and you can at least kind of monitor what we're doing and try to share good info there. So
awesome. And what's your Instagram handle for our listeners?
Katie_Hirsch.PhD.
Awesome. And your Twitter?
And that one's Hirsch KT.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We will link the articles we talked about too in the show notes for the listeners, so that people can check those out if they'd like. And then hopefully we'll have Katie back on, talk about body comp, maybe menstrual cycle stuff. We'll see what's going on. Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.